This morning, Dr. Seema Jaitley, Managing Director of SJ Solutions. Seema has been specialising in pharmacovigilance for 20 years and has headed up global pharmacovigilance and medical affairs for setting up SJ Solutions. SJ Solutions services span both consulting and contracting, provide solutions to drug safety, research and other affairs relating to the running of a business within the pharmaceuticals industry. She has helped companies in implementing the new EU legislation and is currently studying for her MSc in epidemiology. Seema, over to you.
Hi everybody, welcome to the webinar. So with this webinar I'm going to go over the GVP modules as well as some of the changes that have been implemented. They've been in place for a little while now, so now is a good time to kind of look through and see exactly what they refer to and where the changes are. Now, as you all know, there are quite a few, so this is very top line. I'm going to try and pull out the important things from the module, and you can use this as a guide really to where to go to find out information when you're looking for something. I'm hoping to cover this in half an hour. It may go slightly over though, just to warn you in advance. So let's start with the first one, which is GVP Module 1. And as we know, this was something that was brought in with the new legislation, a legal requirement for a quality system. And in fact, from an inspection perspective, this is the one thing that seems to be causing a lot of issues within organizations. And certainly there seems to be a lot of findings around this. You do have to ensure that you have a quality system that is adequate and effective for pharmacovigilance, and there's reference to many different activities, training being one, and making sure you have enough competent, appropriately qualified, trained people. Training records need to be in place, you need to check their understanding, and you need to train non-PV groups as well. Facilities and equipment to perform your PV activities are referred to here, as well as business continuity. And then documentation of your quality system through your manual, your SOPs, your work instructions, and the hierarchy that you should use to show that you have a quality management system. Record management is also covered with regards to making sure that your records are available based on the legal requirements. So within the EU, it's 10 years after last marketing authorization after you've had your last marketing authorization finished. And then for subcontractors as well, you need to ensure that you do have subcontracts available, and you have to have them detailed within your PSMF. This is the place to go to for your QPPV roles and responsibilities, and when you're putting together your process procedure detailing that, it's very clearly listed here. The next two slides just talk about the critical processes, and you can use this to ensure that you have these processes covered within the organization, because this is what would be expected to be seen during an inspection. So monitoring the benefit risk, assessing your risk management systems, so RMPs, etc., effectiveness of the risk minimization, additional risk minimization activities, ICSR management, signal management, and PSURs. Also, you'd need to cover commitments from competent authorities to make sure that you provide information back in a timely manner, product quality defects as well, looking at risk-benefit balance and communication between the marketing authorization holder and national competent authority, and communicating to healthcare professionals and patients. And that's very important, because it's about how do you keep your SPC up to date, how do you keep your patient information leaflet up to date, and providing up-to-date scientific information based on the evaluations that you do within the organization. And then the last one there is variations, and that again falls in line with keeping your information up to date and making sure the end user has the most up-to-date appropriate information. Moving on to the Module 2, this is Pharmacovigilance System Master File, and this was really put in place to try and help improve the PV system overall. Really give you an oversight of how things fit together, what you have in place, and where the gaps are. Located in the EU where your QPPV is, or where your main pharmacovigilance activities are undertaken, and location is in EU Vigilance as well. Needs to be continually available and up to date, and there's a summary that's submitted with the marketing authorization application. You have a logbook, and the logbook shows all the changes, all the relevant changes, I should say, to the Pharmacovigilance System master file, so you can see how it's been updated, when, who, and it gives you a good idea of what changes have been made to the PV system overall. There was an update to this module in April 2013, not a huge update. There was clarification with regards to homeopathic and herbal medications. For these types of products, you don't need to have a full master file. You can have a summary. However, if they don't fall under the relevant registration as detailed in the legislation, then you do need to have a full master file. And also there's reference then about containing documents that are listed in Article 2 of the implementing regulation. So it's very specific about what details and documents should be included within the master file. Just to look at how the master file is put together, it's very similar to the DDPS, which was in place before the master file, and you can see it covers the main areas of your pharmacovigilance system, your QPPV, organizational structure, safety data, where it comes from, what you're using for your safety database and other databases as well, your processes, how do you monitor performance, and your quality system as well. And you can see within the annex there's a whole list of things that need to be provided, such as your list of products, your policies, procedures, subcontractors, your PV partner agreements, all of those kind of things need to be provided here. You can link to other databases, such as your clinical trial database, if you have one in place, and that can be managed, those databases can be managed outside of the master file and don't need to be managed within the master file. But you do have to make sure that your master file is always up to date and current. Within this module, there is discussion as well of what the QPPV needs to be notified of, because the QPPV is meant to have oversight of the PV system, and they are responsible for the PV system as a whole. So you need to ensure that there's a mechanism for prompt notification of these things listed here, location updates, CAPAs, because then they can see exactly where issues are arising within the PV system, deviations from processes, regards to providing the master file to the National Competent Authority, significant services to a third party, because obviously if you're outsourcing, QPPV does need to know, make sure that the third party is appropriate. If you've got new products that are being included into the system, and anything that would mean that there is an increase in the need for resourcing. So it could be new indications, studies, etc. And again, to make sure that you have the right number of people appropriately qualified to manage those activities. You do need notification in writing if there is transfer of responsibility of another PV system to the QPPV. So this would probably be relevant when you have another company where you're working with, or you take over another company's product and you're still using their PV system. Moving on to Module 3. So this is pharmacovigilance inspections now. So here, I mean, it's quite a short module. It was updated in September 2014, but there weren't many substantial changes, more admin-related changes. But the inspections module really talks about making sure that the marketing authorization holder has a satisfactory PV system that can meet its obligations as determined within the legislation, and also a chance to look at non-compliance that may pose a risk to public health, because at the end of the day, that's what they wanted, to make sure that you have everything in place to ensure that public health is maintained appropriately. And then use the inspection results for enforcement where needed. There are different types of inspections, and they're detailed here within the module. So you can have either a system, as in a PV system in totality, or you could have a product related, so to a specific product. Routine, for cause, obviously routine is on a regular basis just to make sure everything is okay. It could be driven though by changes, say for example in QPPV, or it could be driven by new products that have been taken on board, a merger with different companies, and that could drive a routine inspection. For cause is where there is cause for concern, and then the inspection will be looking at a specific issue and really determining whether there are issues with regards to the management of pharmacovigilance within the organisation. And then there is the possibility of having a pre-authorization inspection as well to ensure that the marketing authorization holder does have a fully functioning PV system to be able to place a product on the marketplace. So in the document itself, it does talk about the types of activities that will be looked at and what they're looking for. So, for example, within cases, within signal detection, within PSURs, exactly what they would expect to have in place. And it's quite a good document to look through, especially if you are going to be having an inspection. The next module, Module 4, is on pharmacovigilance audits. So whilst inspections are from a regulatory authority coming into the company, this is where a company should have an audit plan in place. And it's divided up into 3 different levels. So your strategic level, tactical and operational. Your strategic is your long-term kind of exactly where would you want to perform an audit, what areas would trigger an audit. So you can see here things like if there's a major restructure of the organisation, changes to legislation, anything that could lead to a situation where you'd want to ensure that your PV system is operating appropriately. That should really drive an audit, and this should be detailed in your strategic level audit planning. Your tactical level usually covers about a year, and it's your program for the year, exactly where you're going to be auditing, what are the objectives and the scope of those audits. So it could be certain partners, it could be certain areas, it could be case processing, report writing, it could be affiliates. It just depends on what's come out from the strategic level analysis. And then you have the operational level, which includes your plan for the actual audit, how you're going to perform that audit, and how you're going to actually report on the findings, etc. So it's all the detail behind actually performing that individual audit. So within this document, they also detail your findings and how to rate your findings into critical, major, minor, very similar to a inspection. And these are the definitions that are used. So in the critical, if it's a critical finding, it's a potential risk to public health or serious violation of the applicable regulatory requirements, whereas if it's a major, whilst that may still exist, it's not considered as serious as in the critical setting. And for minor, it's a weakness really in one or more of those processes or practices, and it's probably not going to have an effect on the PV system as a whole. So again, you can use these with regards to your audits, but also if you're going to be having an inspection, it will give you an idea of where issues may arise and how findings could be categorized. Right, moving on now to the risk management system. So this is Module 5, and this has been amended a few times, but we are in a public consultation at the moment. But really, this is about characterizing your safety profile for your product and about looking at your risks and looking at missing information, looking at where further detail is needed and saying, do I need to do any more pharmacovigilance activities? Do I need to put risk minimization into place to manage the safety profile of this product? And here you have, the introduction of your definitions for identified risk, where you know about it, potential risk, don't quite have enough information to say it's related to the product, missing information, where data is not available for the product and relevant for clinical use, and then also the important identified and important potential risk, which is really where the risk management plan focuses on. And certainly in this document, this module, you have the template or the details behind what should be included in your risk management plan. There was an update in April 2014, and they removed important from missing information. So before it used to be important missing information, that's not the case anymore. There's the introduction of subpopulation with known relevant and with known and relevant genetic polymorphisms, probably indicating how important it is to consider these kind of areas now. what protocol updates were considered relevant. So if you did have a protocol study that you were putting into place, either for your additional pharmacovigilance activity, if there were updates to that protocol, what would be relevant to add into your risk management plan? And also the summary of treatment benefits was added to Part 6, which is your public summary as well. Probably to, rather than using efficacy, just make it a bit clearer as to what benefit that product will give to a patient. Now there is a public consultation underway, which is due by the 31st of May. And there is a bit of an overhaul, I think, when you look at the new document. There is further clarification with regards to how generic products and well-established products should be managed, because there was some difficulty in understanding what needed to be submitted, what level of detail needed to be submitted, and what you did if you didn't have an innovator risk management plan and how to manage that. So there is more detail around that now. And there's also some process detail as well. How do you remove risks that have been considered important in the past? And an understanding that this document, the risk management plan, will develop over time, and there will be things that will be taken off it as you understand more about the product and get more information. So that, though, isn't available as yet, but like I said, public consultation till the 31st of May, and then it will be released thereafter. Just highlight quickly exactly what the risk management plan looks like, and you can see here it's divided up into 7 parts, and Part 2 has 8 modules. So Part 2 really details all of the kind of the clinical information that you have for your product, and from that you work out what additional activities maybe need to be done. And the additional activities are additional pharmacovigilance activities or additional risk minimization activities. There is a module on risk minimization, which we'll come to. But for the additional pharmacovigilance activities, it's anything over and above your routine, which are your cases, your aggregate reports, signal detection, and even targeted follow-up is considered routine PV. And it's quite clear in this module as to what's routine and what would be considered additional. Okay, if we move on. So the next module is probably one of the heftiest ones, which is Module 6, and it's about ICSR reporting. And overall, it covers your collection, validation, how you enter onto the database, how do you make the assessment for your cases, and reporting to regulatory authorities. So everything you want to know about case management is here. And also what to do in the interim, because there will be a point in time where Vigilance is the only place to go to report. However, that's not the case at the moment. We're still waiting for all of the validation checks to be done before that becomes live. There is discussion about special situations, so those that are listed here, the overdose, abuse, off-label, where there isn't an adverse event. And this is out of scope of this module. However, does need to be captured because there needs to be discussion in your aggregate reports. So there is a requirement to capture information on these kind of cases. So there is a lot of detail in this module, and it should tell you everything that you need to know about case processing and how to manage your cases to ensure that you're capturing the right information, you're following up appropriately and reporting appropriately. The fact that you need enough information to evaluate your cases appropriately. If you have a case that's not valid, you need to track this somewhere, and you need to collect information that will make the case valid. Data protection requirements are covered. The fact that you need to exchange with the regulatory authority appropriately, and there are tables for what the health authority would want to see with regards to non-serious cases, because that does differ authority to authority. So that table has actually been kind of taken out and is a separate document now, but that should be referred to ensure that you're meeting the right timelines according to the national health authorities. Unsolicited, solicited in the sense that if you have a clinical study, then you can only report under either the Clinical Trial Directive, which is 2001/20, or under post-marketing legislation, makes that very clear. There is a table in there that's very confusing, but when you read the text, it is fairly clear about where you should be reporting different studies to. Lay press, media, covered literature, there's a huge appendix with a lot of information with regards to your search terms and how that should be set up, which is very useful. Although the EOA have taken over literature management for case identification, but still there are products that aren't covered that you will need to search for. Biologicals, vaccines, pregnancy, lack of effect, especially if you have a product where there's public health impact, and the fact that you may need to report in a 15-day timeline for that. And emerging safety information is detailed here as well, and what the requirements are, what would constitute emerging safety information, and what you need to do. So there was an update in September 2014, and here this was really with regard to post-authorization studies. There was a lot of confusion with respect to these studies because they are not interventional study, well, I should say for the non-interventional post-authorization studies. The interventional ones are covered appropriately by 2001-20, the Clinical Trial Directive, but here you had to document everything, make note of all adverse events, and now there's a provision for not having to report on studies with high mortality or other adverse events as detailed within the protocol. So you can make a justification as to why certain events shouldn't be reported. So fatal events if it's a study with a high mortality, or other adverse events, as long as it's justified appropriately. And that needs to be detailed in the protocol, and any healthcare professionals that are involved in the study need to be informed as well. And the clock start was also clarified because there was a bit of confusion in the previous version, and now it's very clear exactly when the clock start for your case processing, your day zero really, for regulatory reporting comes from. Right, the next module is Module 7, and this is PSUR's aggregate reports. And here it really follows ICH E2C with regards to the document itself, how to put your report together, the fact that this is a comprehensive critical analysis of your risk-benefit balance, taking into account the safety information you've received in the interval compared to the cumulative information that you have, and also talks about the submission timelines, again, in line with ICH E2C very clearly, there are no differences there. And the fact that it shouldn't be used to provide initial notification of significant new safety information. Now this was updated in December 2013, and here I think there was an understanding that yes, whilst you shouldn't be using it as initial notification for significant issues, there may be issues that come out of reviewing the data because you are looking at a slightly different view of the data. You're looking at your interval data compared to cumulative, and you may find something from that. And that is recognized that you can have that occurring. The reference safety information and reference to that changed slightly, moving away from just the core data sheet and talking about core safety and authorized indications rather than the core data sheet itself only. In the clinical sections, there was a bit more information and guidance as to what to include in the different sections, because there are quite a few sections for the different types of clinical studies. And for signals, if the health authority or regulatory authority requests you to monitor an event, that's not necessarily considered a signal. So there were all these small issues that were coming about where they were creating difficulty in understanding how to manage these situations within the report. Also, clarification that if there are label changes proposed, these should be included in the conclusion section. And the flow for signal management that was in ICH E2C is now included here, and you can see clearly what sections to present different parts of your signal information in. Also, within the document itself, within the module, there's discussion about the generics and well-established products and the fact that you don't need to submit a PSUR unless they are detailed on the EU RD list. And also the EU RD list is introduced and how to manage that with regards to updates and products that are added on. Module 8 now is the post-authorization safety studies, and this really refers to, I mean, it has created a little bit of difficulty sometimes in understanding exactly what is a post-authorization safety study, what isn't. These can be obligated or they can be voluntary. If they're obligated, they're requested by the health authority as part of your marketing authorization. Voluntary is something that you decide to put in as an organization. Now, a post-authorization safety study can also be interventional or non-interventional. They don't always have to be non-interventional. If it's interventional, you follow the clinical trial directive, and if it's non-interventional, this module is applicable. So there's a long definition here with regards to what's considered a non-interventional post-authorization safety study. It's created issues in the past, but this should be used. And the actual module itself does have a lot of information with regards to how you should manage your obligated study requirements. There's certain requirements with regards to submitting your protocol, your final study report, any publications, and these are all detailed within this module. There are also recommendations with regards to voluntary studies and how information regarding this should be transmitted to the health authority, and there are two separate tables that detail this. Was in the original module, that has now been taken out as a separate annex, and it's a separate annex for reporting requirements. There are templates available as well, and detail with regards to what should be included in your protocol, your final study report, and you could use that when putting your studies together. Importantly, the QPPV does have to sign off all the protocols that are considered a post-authorization safety study, and that is something that does need to be put into place in all organizations. And in the update of April 2013, like I said, there's a separate annex, but also details of certain studies, and also categorization of the studies 1 to 4 in line with the risk management systems, which had studies divided up 1 to 4 depending on whether they were mandated or not. So signal detection is module 9, and this refers to how you perform your signal detection, the fact that there's monitoring by the EMA, and EUDravigilance will be you're meant to look at EUDravigilance on a regular basis when it is available. It's not available as yet to marketing authorization holders. I mean, it's not required as yet. It is available, not required as yet for us to use EUDravigilance for signal detection. Importantly, though, there's a lot of discussion about tracking and documentation. So tracking right from your detection through to when you've made your assessment, if appropriate, or said that it's not valid. Whatever you've done, you have to track each of those steps to show the timelines and the time taken to move to the next step, to ensure that you are managing your signals in an appropriate time frame, and documentation to show exactly what was reviewed when you came to that decision as well. Process is detailed as well, and this has caused a bit of confusion. And I mean, I believe they are they're talking about updating this module. I haven't seen anything come out as yet. But the process is meant to be detection, validation, analysis and prioritization, assessment of the signal, what your recommendations are once that assessment has been made, and then the exchange of information as needed. So it sounds quite simple when you put it in this way, but actually the document lacks probably some detail that's needed to help companies put into place the exact decision, perhaps principles that are required. The validation step is causing issue in quite a few companies, but you do need to track each of these, and you need to be able to justify your decision to each of these points as well. Okay, so Module 10 is now additional monitoring. So this was put into place with a symbol and wording that needs to go into the SPC and the package leaflet to highlight the fact that additional monitoring is needed. They want to receive adverse events or adverse reactions, I should say, with regards to these products. In the UK, we had the Black Triangle scheme. They've used the Black Triangle in this situation here. It's for any new active substance and is in place for 5 years, and it's also in place for products that are subject to a post-authorization safety study or additional risk minimization activities. And then also your biological medicinal products, including biosimilars as well. The recommendation is made by PRAC, or there could be a recommendation made by PRAC as well to add this symbol, and this information is publicly available. Okay, Module 15, you can see we can skip a few modules here. Module 15 is safety communication, and this was really about ensuring the smooth communication of safety issues in a coordinated way within the EU to ensure that the same message is sent out and that public confidence is maintained. So I wanted to make sure that you're not getting disparate views from one health authority and then another and then somewhere else, or based on the same product you're getting differences in opinion that go out. It's really to ensure that there is that coordinated message overall. The principles of safety communication are discussed, what should be included in your communication and who that communication should go to, and then the mechanisms are described separately. So your Dear Healthcare Professional communication, websites, press release, bulletins, how inter-authority communication is carried out as well. And the process is detailed here with regards to interaction with the health authority, things like translation, and then how that should be disseminated, what time frames, and the dissemination should occur together. Okay, then the last module is Module 16. This is risk minimization measures. And this talks about your routine and additional risk minimization. So routine, we know, are the wording that's covered in the labeling, the SPC, patient information leaflet, and then there's a whole host of additional risk minimization activities that could be implemented for a certain risk for a product. Things like educational programs, controlled access program, perhaps you need a blood test before you can receive the product. Controlled distribution, maybe it's only available through certain physicians, or your DHPC, so your direct healthcare professional communication, where you're needing to inform the healthcare professionals of a significant issue. And within this document, there's discussion overall with regards to the process indicators, outcome indicators, and the need for evaluation, so that you do need to ensure that your additional risk minimization is being managed appropriately and is meeting the goals that it needs to. The process indicators are all about your the actual process of that activity. So how many, what percentage of healthcare professionals have received the educational program, who should be receiving it. It's those kind of indicators, whereas your outcome indicators are about how what you've done has affected that risk overall, and a measurement of controlling that risk in whatever way you have decided with regards to the objective of that risk minimization. This evaluation needs to be included in the risk management plan and the PSUR as well. I think overall, there has been an update in April 2014, but we probably do still need a bit more information with regards, or a bit more guidance, I should say, with regards to the evaluation, because that is proving to be difficult, and why there seem to be lots of surveys in place to check understanding. I think actual true evaluation of whether the risk minimization has actually achieved the goal that it set out to has been a bit harder to probably implement. So the amendment in April 2014 was talking about, I think, really the burden of these kind of activities, to make sure that there is a real requirement to implement an additional risk minimization activity, rather than just implementing it without thinking of the burden on the healthcare professionals and the health system as a whole. So they talked about controlled access programs and the fact that this really should be an exception, not the norm. And so it's really taking that, making sure that you're making the right decision overall for the risk and for the environment that you're in. And they do talk about outcome indicators and the fact that if you do have a rare event or exposure is inadequate, you may not have enough data to be able to measure that outcome overall, in which case you can use your process indicators instead. There is an addendum as well that's available, and that was in December 2015, so just gone, and that talks about educational materials, specifically the principles of what should be included, the layout, content, submission, how you should get that approved, assessment overall, and the fact that they would be published. And I think that's the last slide. So I know that was a very quick trip through all of the modules and kind of what's changed. Hopefully it gives you an idea there of where to go, where some things are probably needing a little bit more clarification and where clarification is coming as well. So are there any questions? So, Friel, you mentioned validation is proving a challenge for organisation. So that I was talking about signal detection then. So signal detection is an issue because I think it's the definition of validation, signal detection, and then the validation step, and understanding what you're trying to do with the validation step that is different to your assessment of your signal overall. And I think that's causing a few problems for companies. Are there any more questions? Okay, no. Well, I'll stop there. Thank you very much. If you do have anything else, please do send us an email or let us know. Thank you.